Hi, welcome to the video that is the first part of Standard 3A, reviewing nomenclature or naming and counting atoms. So state the name and chemical formula for a compound composed of oxygen and aluminum. So every time you kind of find a chemical formula, you have to decide if it's ionic or covalent. If it's covalent, then you have all nonmetals in your set of elements. If it's ionic, you have a cation, which is a positively charged ion, and an anion, which is a negatively charged. To help you remember, cats are positive, okay? And anions are sour like onions. That also helps you with those spelling. So first thing you do every time, figure out if it's ionic or covalent. So let's look up some information. Oxygen is in group 16 or family 16. It could be called either way. And that is the 16 column on the periodic table. That means it has 6 valence electrons, 6 electrons in its outer energy layer. It wants to have 8 electrons so that it can be like a noble gas and complete its octet. So as you can see, it's too short. So oxygen, chemical symbol, capital O, has a -2 charge when it's in its ion state. It's in group 16 and at the top, so we know it's a non-metal. So we now know that oxygen, when it's in its ion state, it's an anion and it's a non-metal. So it's all going to hinge on what aluminum is. Aluminum is in group 13, so 3 valence electrons. So it's a lot easier to lose 3 electrons than to gain 5 electrons. So he has 3 extra electrons, making him a cation. So now we're looking, and we know, since we have a cation and an anion, we must be going after that ionic bond. What's the rule for ionic bonds? Cation first. You always start with the positive. I like you, but, okay, so aluminum's going to be first. Al, capital A, lowercase l. When you start a new sentence, you start with a capital letter. When you start a new element, you start with a capital letter. Aluminum has 3+ for its charge, and oxygen has 2- for the charge. The charges are always going to have a plus or minus with them. They're in the superscript position where we're going to now do the crisscross. You take the absolute value or just the number, and you give it to the subscript of the other person. Same thing, take the absolute value, and then that subscript goes over there. Those subscripts are telling me how many atoms or how many ions we have of each substance. So we have 2 aluminum cations to balance out 3 oxygen anions. When we write this chemical formula, this has a lot of extra stuff on it. We're just going to write Al2O3. Capitalization is still there. Those atoms are still there. Make sure your atoms do not have a sign. We don't show the signs because the atoms would give us the signs if we need to figure that out again. This is the chemical formula. And its name, go back again. Was that ionic or covalent? That was ionic we're doing. Ionic naming is name the cation, aluminum. Name the anion, oxygen. Take the suffix off of the anion and add an I. Okay. And oxygenide just did not sound good, so they just made it even shorter. Aluminum oxide is the chemical name. So there we go for review of ionics there. Oh, and how many of each element? So let me clear that off there so we can just see that chemical formula. Al2O3, we have 2 aluminums and 3 oxygens. It always goes to the The number is on the right side of it. So you never see a chemical formula that's X aluminum. Okay, there's not anything in there. We got to save that space for the coefficients, which you'll learn about later if you have not learned about that yet. So that's telling me 2 atoms of aluminum, 3 atoms of oxygen, or more specifically, 2 ions of aluminum and 3 ions of oxygen. So 5 total, if we have to do a total in there. How many of each element are in iron 2 chloride? So again, we got to figure out, are we going to have to do crisscrossing? Because that's what ionic is. Ionic, we always crisscross to find the formula. But if it's covalent, we read it directly off because it has prefixes. I look here, I do not have prefixes. I have this weird Roman numeral 2 here. So I'm thinking that's going to be important, but I do not have any prefixes. So this is not covalent. So I, again, am going to have to do that crisscrossing like we did last time. This Roman numeral 2, that's the charge. So I didn't have a Roman numeral last time. Why not? Aluminum has a very steady charge at 3. Okay. Iron charge can change or transition. Okay. So iron, chemical symbol, capital F, lowercase e, with a 2+ charge. Chloride, that means the element chlorine. Okay. The "ide" is just telling us it was in a compound, but when I'm separating it back out, I'm going to have to look for chlorine. Capital C, lowercase l, and that one is an anion with a 1 charge. 2, 1, Fe1Cl2. Now, this is showing me we have 1 element of iron and 2 elements of chlorine. So that is correct for that answer. When you're actually writing the chemical formula, though, that 1 is more like a ninja, FeCl2. He is invisible. We take that off there just like we do in algebra with the 1x plus 5 equals 25. We tend to just say x plus 5 equals 25. Same thing for the number of atoms. It just is cleaner and faster for us to write. And chemists can be kind of lazy about that. So there we go. Next guy. What is the proper chemical formula for chromium 5 sulfate? That's not a V. That is the 5 in the Roman numerals. Chromium, capital C, lowercase r, 5+ charge. It might not do a 5+ in real life. If they give you a Roman numeral, you go with it, even if it's not one that you would normally see. And I don't actually know. I don't have chromium's oxidation states memorized, so it could be common or not common. I just wanted to remind you on the SOL, if that's what they tell you, that's what you do. Sulfate is SO4. Why did I put parentheses around here? Polyatomics. Get parentheses. And why is that? Because we are protecting this whole ion. That is the anion. SO4 is the whole anion. It just has many atoms in its one anion. So when I'm crisscrossing, I have those force field, that parenthesis, to make sure I'm crisscrossing all the way on the other side of the parentheses. Same with the 5. That guy is going over there. Cr2, SO4, 5. This would be the appropriate chemical formula for chromium 5 sulfate. How many of each element are in 1 formula unit? 1 formula unit, or 1 mole's worth. We have 2 chromiums. And what do I do with the yes? I'm going to distribute it just like I would in math. It's just in a weird place, but I'm going to distribute it like parentheses. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 oxygens. I'm going to write that one out instead of writing the chemical symbol so it doesn't look like another 0. And Everything in the parenthesis gets distributed. So that 5 also goes times the 1 in sulfur for 5 sulfurs. So for the number of each element, I have 2 chromiums, 20 oxygens, and 5 sulfurs come together in one formula unit of this substance. How many of each ion? Okay, so ions talking about cations and anions from before. Cations are the positive ones. Okay, and how many of the positives? We have 2. Anions are the negative ones. We have 5 sulfate anions. So again, you're looking outside the parentheses. If there was no parentheses, NaOH, put the parentheses back in just so that you can see the division. We have 1 sodium and 1 hydroxide. The hydroxide, again, is the polyatomic, and again, in this case, is the anion. So even though sodium hydroxide is written without parentheses, if you put them in, it's helpful to when you're doing these items like counting or molar mass. According to the first data bank, this drug is used to treat mild to moderate pain from headaches, menstrual periods, toothaches, backaches, osteoarthritis, cold, flu, aches and pains, and to reduce fever. How many atoms of nitrogen are in this molecule? So we're just looking at the one molecule. And I'm remembering, yeah, it's never on the front because that's where the coefficients are. So carbon has to have 8, hydrogen has to have 9, oxygen has 2, but now I'm confused. What do I do with nitrogen? Do I give him a 9? Oh, remember, there's nothing there. We're going to fill in a 1. So there is 1 atom of nitrogen in that molecule. And that's all for the first tape or the first video of this. Have a good day.